Broadcasting from the Bayou State and all around the Gulf Coast and streaming nationwide. This is the C.L. Bryant Show.
Welcome to the C.L. Bryant Show. This is Mike Woods sitting in the big man's chair. C.L. is on his way to Washington, D.C., and I have the privilege of filling in tonight, and I'm sitting here with Michelle. And Michelle, we have a full program tonight.
We've gotten so many calls about Obamacare, the state budget in Louisiana, health care, et cetera, et cetera. And so we had to pull you in to kind of decipher this for us.
Well, it's going to be an interesting night. We have the Commissioner of Administration, Jay Darden, that's going to be on in just a few minutes, and we're going to talk about the upcoming legislative session and what all's involved for the state of Louisiana. And then we're going to get Congressman Dr. Ralph Abraham, who has represented the 3rd Congressional District from Monroe area, and he will talk to us about what's going on in Washington with the Obamacare repeal. We're going to have former Congressman Dr. John Fleming, who is a physician and spent 8 years in Washington, D.C., and he is going to help us with the equation of what's going on. Then later on today we have State Rep Dodie Horton, who will be in, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the upcoming legislative session and a bill that she's sponsoring on behalf of Sheriff Whittington. And then we also have my friend Philip Roseman, Dr. Philip Roseman, who's
kind of give us medical expertise, kind of help us out with some of this.
And when we get out of line, he's going to straighten us out. But help me understand, why am I here?
Nobody knows that. People ask all the time, now, who is that guy with that funny accent? But you have graduated from high school.
I did. I got out of high school, I believe. It was a long time ago.
And college.
College,
you have a law degree.
Yeah, I even went to law school. Yeah.
A master's degree in environmental.
Yeah, environmental science.
You're an adjunct professor.
Adjunct professor at LSUS. Getting ready to teach another class in the business school this fall. I'm going to teach.
And we have a special announcement that we can't make tonight, but you're going to be advising in a business capacity because business is your expertise, and then you've been in the oil business for 400 years.
Yeah, for a long time. Started as a landman for city service in 1974 and been in it ever since. I'm like that buggy whip maker. I've always made buggy whips.
But you do a lot in the oil business, and you in exploration. What is that?
I go out and drill wells. In fact, I have a rig. I just got a mud log from a well that I'm drilling in Nolan County right now, and I'll be
Nolan County. What
Nolan
state?
County is in Texas. Sweetwater, home of the Rattlesnake Roundup. In fact, the Rattlesnake Roundup will be happening in a couple of weeks.
It sounds like you would enjoy that.
I've been there a couple of times.
This accent is real, people. So you still talk like that after going to school that long?
Of course I do. It's the people I hang out with.
You don't hang out with me.
Nope.
So, and today is one of your favorite days.
It's Pi Day.
But you told me it's not really Pi Day.
It's not technically, because pi is really 3.1415, and today is 31417. But if you just round it to 3.14, it is Pi Day.
So now you've proven to us that you are a nerd.
Yes.
And you wear pens in your pocket. So, okay, tell us something else about the oil business, because we do, every time you're on the show, I get emails, Facebook messages. Give us a little update.
Well, everybody wants to know the big question. Is gasoline getting ready to go up? And historically, as I've said over and over again, because we're getting ready to go into a summer blend, which is because of the volatility of gasoline, you have to go to a summer blend.
The volatility of the price of gasoline?
No, because of the volatility of it evaporating and going up in the air. You have to worry about that. And so summer blend is a more costly gasoline to make. So historically, if crude prices are the same, summer gasoline costs more than winter gasoline. And also, guess what? It's less efficient because it has more ethanol in it. But
see, you are smart.
Well, I am sometimes. But the big problem that the oil industry is facing right now is this month the price of crude has dropped over 12%. In fact, it closed today at $47.72. Per barrel from a high of 54.45 just 14 days. So in
14 days ago.
14 days ago, we've lost 12%.
Well, you've been on a lot, so I've learned a little bit finally, and you've talked about oil independence. You said a few years ago we were almost oil. We were on our way.
We were approaching. We would have been energy independent by 2020 had we kept the rate of production.
Because we were doing 9.
We were over 10 million barrels a day of production back in the heyday, and then when the price of oil went from 100 to 26, you lost over 1 million barrels of production. In fact, you lost more than 1 million barrels. But with prices being over 50, the last 2 months we've gotten over $50 a barrel, and so as a result, a lot of the wells in the shale area have been brought online, and we have jumped domestic production by about 500,000 barrels a day here in the
about
U.S.
10 million. And you said that oil independence for us is 16 million
16
barrels
to 17
a day.
million a day, yes.
So that's oil independence, which that means, so this involves Saudi Arabia, and they may not be our friends.
Well, and they are not happy. They are not happy because they have cut their production back, and as a result, they had hoped that prices would go up. Because
so they cut their production. And when they did that, we started producing more. People
Correct.
went back into the oil business because you've told me before, you've got to be able to make money by pulling the oil out of the ground. The oil is there, but if you can't make enough money to take it out of the ground,
it's not economic
so
to
we
get it out of the ground.
basically could be oil independent.
We could be oil independent if we would rid ourselves of OPEC and all the foreign production. And one of the interesting things that Donald Trump has proposed is this border tax. And should he end up having a border tax on foreign crude to make domestic crude more expensive, you would see an increase in domestic production. But
Okay, well, and that's back to Trump. Well, I'm sure there's environmentalists listening to us right now going, "Oh my God, we can't be oil independent," because they don't like us taking the oil out of the ground. But you know about the environment with a master's in that, so you try to be environmentally friendly when you're doing this.
Yes, I mean, people in the business, and I know there are those the environmentalists hate us all, whether we're any type of fossil fuel, because they want us to all have windmills on top of our cars. But
well, you have a windmill on your hat right now.
Yeah, well, that's my hair. That's my
okay,
hair.
I thought it was one.
Yeah. But it's an interesting time in the business, and as we go forth, OPEC is rattling swords, saying that they're going to, well, they actually have started increasing production, and that's why you're seeing.
But
the
are
price
you glad
of
that we have
down.
a business friend like Donald
no
Trump
question.
in the White House?
And we have a business friend in the EPA, and we have a business friend in the cabinet. I mean, for the first time,
we have Texas Governor
Rick Perry. So it's yeah.
And you know him. I'm sure you've worked with him.
Yeah, gave him money years ago.
Yeah,
but
there and all that. Well, when we come back and talk with Commissioner Darden, we can talk about oil and our budget, because our budget is based on the price of oil.
Our budget at one time, the price of crude contributed 50% to the revenues of the state. Now it's down to about 12.5%. But anyway, yeah, we're all in the oil business whether we are or not. This is Mike Wood sitting in the studio with Michelle for C.L. Bryant. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to the CL Bryant Show. This is Mike Wood sitting in for CL tonight with Michelle, and we have on the line the State Commissioner of Administration from the great state of Louisiana. Jay, you were one of the smartest people I knew in law school, but you have jumped into the fire in Baton Rouge. What has happened, my friend?
I have been under fire, Mike, but it seems to be getting hotter lately. It's good to talk to you. I hadn't seen you in a while.
It has been a while. Well, you have got an upcoming legislative session starting April the 10th. We were just talking prior to the break on the price of oil that has dropped 12.5% in the last month, and of course the state budget depends greatly on the price of oil. As you go into the upcoming legislative session, and the folks in Baton Rouge that are saying we can't afford new taxes, and then there are those that say, but we can't afford not to, and we're getting ready to lose about $1.2 billion in taxes that will expire at the end of this year. What's going to happen April 10th?
It's anybody's guess, really, at this point. And it's interesting, the oil used to make up more than 40% of the state's budget, literally in the 80s before the first crash. It's only about 12% of the budget, but I put quotes around that only now. It's about 12% of the overall revenue to the state, so we're not as dependent upon it, but clearly we're dependent upon the jobs that are created in the industry all across the state, and that's what's really been affecting us so adversely is the unemployment rate really everywhere in Louisiana except for the Baton Rouge area and the Lake Charles area.
Well, and I give you credit because for years the state budget was predicated on a number that turned out each year to be higher than what it actually was, and so we ended up with a deficit every year. And I believe right now the budget's predicated on $30 crude oil.
Well, it just changed. The Revenue Estimating Conference met last month and increased it to the low I don't remember the exact number, to the low 40s, based upon what had been happening in the industry. But obviously, we're seeing a lot of fluctuation, you know as well as anybody, and not sure where this is going to be heading long term. But the forecast was increased for next year's budget to a higher number. We're hoping that number is realized, obviously, and that it'll hold. But this session is a fiscal session, meaning that taxes can be addressed. So you're not going to see a whole lot of special sessions, I hope, this year. The business can be done in the regular session, and there'll be a lot of business to be done. We've got a budget that to basically stay where we are right now in next year's budget, we're $440 million short of what's needed. And then we have, as you referenced, we have this fiscal cliff that we're facing on July 1 of next year, where most of the taxes that were passed by the legislature last year are going to sunset and roll off. So if they're not renewed, we've got another massive problem like we had last year. So this session will be about discussing what this tax code looks like and what it ought to look like, and hopefully we'll get some resolution as to what our revenue stream is going to be for the next fiscal year.
Well, do you have any proposals? And I will say that we were all surprised how this special session ended. Were you pleased with that at all? I mean, nobody's going to get all that they want, but do you see people starting to work together and addressing the problems of Louisiana?
Overall, we were pleased. It took quite a lot to get there. The governor had suggested using the entirety of the 1/3 of the rainy day fund, which would have been $119 million, as has been done in the past years, really 4 or 5 times during the Jindal years without any objection. But a lot of objection this year, and so only 99, and again, I put quotes around that, only $99 million of the rainy day fund was used, and there were cuts made elsewhere instead of recognizing that revenue. But by and large, it was a good resolution. We have to make some cuts, and we'll be announcing those cuts probably before this week is out, that are going to be difficult for a lot of folks, but we have to make them because we have to have a balanced budget.
Well, let me ask you, are you allowed to give us a hint about what some of those cuts will be?
A number of them will be in accordance with what the legislature passed. For example, there was a less than 1% cut on the partner hospitals that have been the successors to the charity hospital system. The legislature said we could not cut those partner hospitals more than that 0.99%. Rural hospitals were also cut that amount as well. The legislature also cut an amount of money in what's called attrition, which are vacant positions. We said at the time we didn't think we'd be able to realize the almost $12 million that they assigned to that aspect of the budget, and I can tell you that we're not going to be able to find that number. It'll be a number significantly less than that. We'll probably announce it in the next couple of days, but we won't be able to realize that full number. But the legislature actually gave me, as the Commissioner of Administration, the authority to make cuts as needed to ensure that we had a balanced budget, and that's exactly what we'll do.
Jay, everybody, and I know it's frustrating for you as we go through this process. Everybody wants everything paid for, but nobody wants to pay for it. And we have elected officials, especially on our side of the aisle, that just say, yeah, we want to keep the med school, we want to keep all the schools open, but we're not going to vote for any more revenue to do such. I mean, how do you get it across to these folks? And I've had battles with lobby and others.
2 minutes.
How do you get the idea across to folks? Look, you either have to pay for it or you close it. One of the two. Make up your mind.
Well, that is obviously a very hot topic of discussion during the legislative session, and will be in this upcoming session. And we've said if you're not going to provide the revenue that's necessary to do what it is we've been doing, then you have to vote for the cuts. You have to identify where you want to cut. And you're absolutely right. Nobody wants to cut anything, and a lot of folks don't want to raise any revenue. And I understand the arguments made on both sides. I made them for quite a while when I was in the state senate for 15 years. But you come to a point in time where you have to recognize that if you're going to provide a level of service, you have to pay for it, and you have to recognize the revenue that's going to be necessary to do that. And we're going to continue to have those discussions, and we're going to suggest to the legislature where we think cuts ought to be made. And we've made an awful lot of cuts under this administration that a lot of people don't give the governor credit for. And we're going to continue to make the recommendations for cuts, and we'll continue to make recommendations on how we think revenue ought to be generated. And the task force that was created by the legislature and with the support of the governor has worked all during this past year to make a series of recommendations, many of which are going to be the subject of legislation during the session.
Well, when we come back,
going to announce those plans.
We're coming up on a
I'll
break.
wait.
When we come back, let's talk about that task force and give some details on that. That's a bipartisan task force, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
Excellent. All right. Well, we're on with Louisiana Commissioner Jay Darden, and we'll be back after the break.
Welcome back to the C.L. Bryant Show. This is Mike Wood sitting in for C.L. Bryant in the studio with Michelle, and we have the State Commissioner of Administration, Jay Darden, on the phone. And when we went into the break, we were talking about the upcoming legislative session and had just gotten into the task force on structural changes in budget and tax policy. Jay, what are some of the 3 or 4 major issues that came out of that recommendation from that task force?
Hey, Jay, are you there?
Well, we've lost Jay Darden.
But it's okay because we've got Philip Roseman, who just happens to be on Committee of 100, who knows about that while I pull Jay back on. He's right there.
As we went into the break, and Dr. Roseman is here in the studio, and we were talking with the Commissioner of Administration.
Mike.
Jay, okay, that's all right.
Technical difficulties. It's because our taxes are so high in Louisiana.
It's operator error.
I'm on my cell phone, and so I have to admit it may have been me. But in any event, one of the main recommendations of the task force was to not renew the 5th penny of sales tax that was added last year. We have the highest combined local and state sales tax in America, and the task force felt like that was usually in the purview of local governments to deal with sales taxes, and we think it's just not good policy for the state to have a 5-cent sales tax. But obviously that tax will have to be replaced with some alternative income. And one of the recommendations is to broaden the sales tax base and reduce the rates. So we're hoping to expand the sales tax to some services that are rendered in Louisiana, just as they are in Texas. And we're using the Texas model because it's been in place for an extensive period of time, and it provides us a little guidelines on how it can be administered and what it might raise. And that's an important broadening of the base. If we can lower that rate and make more people help pay. That's one of the tenets of good tax policy.
And a lot of people complain about the differences between Texas and Louisiana, especially about doing business and different things, that we don't want to out-tax ourselves, that people can just walk across the border, set up their business there, and avoid taxes here altogether. So we're happy to hear that we're looking at Texas and not taxing ourselves higher than Texas. So what would one of those services be?
Well, let me just point out something first, because Texas does not have an income tax, and that's one of the things that often people talk about and say Louisiana ought not have an income tax, because Florida doesn't and Texas doesn't.
And their economies are thriving. Both of those states are seeing huge growth in population, and their economies are thriving. That's
right. They also, though, have independent school districts. They don't have the system we have in Louisiana, where the state spends literally $3.4 billion of state tax dollars to assist K-12 education in all of our parishes across the state. Texas has a huge property tax, and Louisiana does not have property tax to speak of unless you're in business because of the homestead exemption. And so the 2 states have grown up with different tax policies, and you can make arguments that one's better than the other, one's good, one's bad. But to see a wholesale change like many people have suggested, for example, to do away with the income tax in Louisiana, that's about 1/3 of the entire revenue stream that we have in the state. So it really is not necessarily a practical answer as long as we're going to continue to provide the high level of assistance to local government, particularly with the AFP, that we do. So that's an important distinction between the 2 states. I don't have the list of services in front of me right now, but I can tell you what's not included. Doctors, lawyers, architects, engineers are not included. It is a number of other services that are rendered primarily to individuals. Business-to-business services are not proposed to be taxed. And again, this will be the subject of a great deal of discussion.
I can only imagine it will be.
Because a lot of people who provide certain services are going to try and be excluded. But again, the idea is to broaden the base, and so you've got to kind of, if you're going to do this, I think you've got to do it on a very broad basis. And we'll see how this argument plays out. The point will be we'll drop a penny of sales tax and broaden the base of sales tax payers. The task force also made recommendations regarding individual and corporate income taxes, and the governor is going to have an announcement in another week or 10 days about his suggestion on how that needs to be addressed during the session.
As we went through revising STELI, And one of the concerns I have in the upcoming session, as you recall, when we revised the Stelly plan, we got rid of some taxes, but we didn't replace it with any revenue source, and that's part of the reason that we're in the dilemma we're in. I can
exactly
see
right.
I can see a great number of folks saying, "Yeah, let's eliminate the penny," but we're not going to come up with any more revenue, and we end up in a worse case scenario than we are now. What do we do?
That's right. Or simply decide to renew the penny when it expires and just perpetuate that system. I mean, all of those are possibilities. But you're correct. When Stelly was repealed, the income tax features of Stelly were repealed, but the sales tax changes that it wound up reducing taxes were not changed. So it's one of the reasons why our budget has been so out of kilter for the past, certainly during the John Bell Edwards administration. We did not have that revenue stream from Stelly, and the budget had been built on one-time money, the use of one-time money that's not coming back to fund recurring expenses. And we stopped that. We're not doing that as a budget practice anymore. It's terrible practice, terrible policy, and the budgets that this governor's proposed have been balanced based upon recurring money that's going to come back year to year. It just makes sense that you can't spend one-time money on recurring expenses, but we did that for 8 years.
Yeah, and as you know, of course, the big concern up here, and Governor Edwards has promised us to keep the med school, but the big concern is we end up every year because higher ed is not protected by the Constitution. Healthcare and higher ed ultimately take the brunt of the cuts, and so here we go.
And it has been higher ed that suffered mostly. We have not cut higher ed in this year's budget. We made a priority not to cut it. In the mid-year cuts that we just recommended, higher ed was spared. Now the proposed budget for 18, which is $440 million short of what it really needs to be, does have a cut to higher ed, as it does to all aspects of government. But we made it as modest as we could, 2%. But that's still a significant amount of money that agencies and departments of government are going to feel if there's no new revenue realized.
Well, you've got a tough row to hoe as we head in. I hope the session turns out as at least as amicable as the special session did. But appreciate what you're doing for the state of Louisiana, and just keep fighting,
and we'll have
buddy.
you back, Jay, because this 20 minutes went by so quickly. So expect to be hearing from us. We
always
appreciate
glad
you.
to talk to you, and we are going to protect that medical school in Shreveport. I can assure you that.
Thank you, sir. Mike Wood sitting in for C.L. Bryant. We'll be.
Broadcasting from the Bayou State and all around the Gulf Coast and streaming nationwide. This is the C.L. Bryant Show.
Welcome back to the C.L. Bryant Show. This is Mike Wood sitting in CL's chair with Michelle, and we have on the phone with us Dr. Ralph Abraham, congressman from the northeastern part of Louisiana, and we have Dr. Philip Roseman, our resident medical expert here as well. Dr. Abraham, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Good to be here.
You got a lot going on in Washington. Tell us what's happening with the Health Care Act.
Well, we are marching forward as we should be doing. We certainly have got a good base bill to start with. There will be amendments and some tweaks as we move through the next 2 to 3 weeks. But, the end result is going to be about 10,000 times better than what we're dealing with now, and that's the Obamacare debacle.
Well, Congressman Abraham, are you surprised when you hear from your constituents or you see on the news how they're trying to say that the GOP has no plan, that it's never going to work, that we're not going to get the votes? But really, isn't Tom Price behind this plan?
I guarantee you, and Tom's a good friend of mine. He has headed the Doctors Caucus, which I'm very privileged to be on for the last 2 years when I first got elected and continue to be on. Tom knows what he's doing. He is spearheading this. He is leading the ship. And, the media, I'm not surprised at what they are putting out there. They do not want anything on the GOP side to succeed in any form or fashion. But we will succeed, and we're going to succeed. And it's going to be, again, I can't stress enough to everyone that is listening and everyone I talk to up here and back at home in my district that, what we have now is not failing. It has failed. Premiums are sky high. Deductibles are $6,000 to $8,000 per person. And it's just, it's untenable, and it's adding to the $20 trillion deficit that we have, and we've got to get it right. We understand that on the Republican side, but we will get it right.
Representative Abraham, let me ask you a question. As a physician, a lot of this has been about the regulations that have come out of Obamacare that continue to evolve and the impact that they have. Do you think the change in the DHH is going to be substantial in terms of the regulatory environment?
I do. Again, you and I both know, Doc, that as physicians, I can't write the prescription I want to write for my patient. It's written not on the formulary, and again, I've had to go to 4 or 5 drugs down on the list, which is not the drug I initially wanted to go to. I can't get my patients to a specialist that I need them to get to in rural America. So, yeah, the regulatory issue, again, not only in healthcare, but you pick any profession, agriculture, business, under the previous administration they literally, have had, chains on our feet, our legs, just holding us back from going forward, trying to make a dollar, trying to provide for our families. So, again, the regulatory burden, as you see, Trump announced even yesterday, it's going to go away. And I'm looking so forward to, moving forward with all these plans, both in agriculture, healthcare, you name the business, it's going to get better.
Well, are you expecting, and I know that I guess Congress was closed today because of the snow, but tomorrow the bill goes to the Budget Committee, and they're going to do markups there. What are we looking at for? Because that's what we're going to hear about. Average Joe is going to hear about this in the news, just like we did about the CBO yesterday. Oh, it's terrible. What are you expecting to come out of tomorrow's hearings with the Budget Committee?
Well, look, you've got great men and women leading that Budget Committee, so they're going to make some tweaks. And again, what you're going to see is that the things that we cannot do on the first part during reconciliation with the Senate, because you're not allowed to do certain things with the reconciliation bill, we will take care of that in phase 2 or step 2, whatever you want to call it. There will be other things that we will do as far as buying insurance across state line, lowering drug costs. Those things will get done. And then stage 3 will be a Tom Price type deal. And on the administrative side, he can do a lot from his perch too. But let's go to that CBO score. The good news is that, it is going to lower the deficit by, I think, $337 billion is what they said. It's going to cap Medicaid for the first time in history, saving the taxpayers about $880 billion. It's going to lower taxes because we are repealing the $1 trillion worth of taxes in the original Obamacare by 883 or some huge amount billion. So And it's going to, in my little area of the world, for me in rural America trying to practice medicine, it's going to increase choice for my patient, and that's what I need to happen. So it's good. I know the CBO said that, well, you're going to jump 24 million Americans off health care. No, you're not. What the CBO is basing that figure on is the Obamacare figure when everybody was mandated to buy health care. I mean, if you've got to buy it, sure. Now, on the Republican side, we're going to give them access to that plan, a plan that he or she can afford, but we're not going to make them buy it. This is still America, and people still have choices. So that's where the CBO gets the 24 million off the records. They're wrong, I can tell you, by probably exponential factor. But they base that on Obamacare mandates, and we're not going to have a mandate in the Republican bill that you have to buy insurance.
Dr. Abraham, there's always this lack of affordability has impacted, I think, the middle class in America, greatly. My question is the Republican plan going to be better in terms of what it does as far as affordability for those folks that get up every day, go to work?
Yes, it is. Again, right now, the middle class, which I consider myself. I mean, I don't make a ton of money either, and my deductible is $6,000 on the plan that just Diane and I have. Our premiums are, I think, $850 to $1,000 a month. So even in my little area of the world, it's something that I am self-insuring myself for the first $6,000 to $7,000. That's what's happening into middle America. And look, I understand there are many millions of people far less fortunate than I am that are living paycheck to paycheck that, they cannot afford what is going on now. So I will tell you that the Republican plan for middle-class America are good men and women that make this country work as it should every day. They're going to be much, much better off.
Well, and I'll give you another great example. My barber, who is diabetic, pays the $2,500 fine every year because he said my deductible was so high, I thought I'd just go in and pay the fine and not pay the premium.
Look, and that's what's happening to so many of my patients, so many of my friends. Again, I live in the middle of a cornfield where I grew up as a boy. My friends and the people that I associate with are farmers and ranchers and just good, hard-working people that, they work from can to cane, but they can't afford a $6,000 deductible and a premium of, it's just like you said, if you have a pre-existing condition like hypertension, like diabetes, then your premium is going to be upwards of $1,500 to $2,000 a month. And, it's unaffordable, it's unacceptable. And if I can do anything with this interview, I want to quell the fears of those that are listening. The Republican plan is going to be better. Don't listen to the media because all they care about is making the Republicans look bad, and Obamacare looks like it's the greatest thing that's ever happened, and it's about the worst thing that's ever happened.
Dr. Ralph Abraham, Congressman from Northeast Louisiana. Doc, we appreciate your service to our country and appreciate you coming on the show and helping people understand exactly what's happening in Washington. This is Mike Wood sitting in for C.L. Bryant. We'll be back.
Okay, sure.
Welcome back to the CL Bryant Show. This is Mike Wood sitting in for CL, and I have Michelle in the studio and Dr. Philip Roseman. And on the phone, we have the former congressman of the 4th Congressional District, Dr. John Fleming. John, how are you, my friend?
Hey, Mike, doing great. Good to talk with you this evening.
Good talking to you. We appreciate you coming on. We just had Dr. Abraham on the line and talking about what was going to happen tomorrow in Budget Committee and the process that we're going through. You having spent 8 years there in Washington and as part of the Doctors Caucus, one of the things we're trying to do tonight is to help the misleading media who has led us to believe that you spent 8 years up there and didn't do anything and never considered Obamacare. And give us some background of what all has transpired prior to this. All of a sudden now we have the ability to repeal Obamacare.
Yeah, and I'll start. I know Dr. Roseman's there, and Dr. Roseman has been through this almost as long as I have. But remember, let's go back to 1965 when prior to the advent of Medicare and Medicaid, the only help that government gave people for health care was states providing charity care. That system is pretty much out, and Medicare, Medicaid have taken over, and then Obamacare, of course, in 2010. But one of the things that frustrated me and led me to run for Congress is that as the Medicare and Medicaid became more expensive and taxpayers couldn't afford it, remember Medicaid is paid 100% by taxpayers, Medicare is paid 66% by taxpayers, and so what was happening is doctors were being told to do more with less. Their pay was cut, and then they were also told that through EMTALA and other laws that they would. And so it really became to a point to where doctors just could not tolerate the system because they weren't able to take care of their patients with the adequate reimbursement. So Hillary Care came along. Fortunately, that got taken out. That was a single-payer system. And so I went to Washington, Mike, to try to get us into reform that would be market-based and patient-centered. Instead, we got Obamacare. But I was there for the entire debate. I predicted that the prices would go up, the insurance access would go down, that it would be a big, expensive, government-run system that people would not like. People would get cards but not really access to care, and that's precisely what we have. Now we've got to repeal that and replace it. And I think it's very unfair to say that this is Obamacare light. It does a lot of things, and let me just quickly go through what they are, and then I'll toss it back to you. Number one, it repeals all but one of the taxes. There's 18 different taxes. It repeals all but one of them. It takes away the mandates for employers and employees. That's huge. That's killing our economy. It stops the bleeding through Medicaid in about 3 years, where we go back to a reasonable Medicaid system. And it sets the stage for Tom Price of HHS to begin fixing this situation with his ability with regulation, which he will have a lot of power. And then we need Democrats to come on board and work with us to perfect this system after we get all of that done. So I really think we need to get this done. Yes, it can be improved. As you know, I am a co-founder of the Freedom Caucus, and the Freedom Caucus is one of the main dissenters on this, but I do believe they will come along and they will get behind this. We just need to, I think they want to perfect it, improve it, and so we can be fully proud of everything that comes out of this, the law passage.
John, this is Philip Roseman.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about foundation principles, and we've had this discussion and love to have it on the air about why this was just destined to be unaffordable. What are the things that we're changing that's really going to make this a more affordable health plan from the Republicans?
Well, yeah, Dr. Roseman, as you know, the Obamacare as it's set up through with the exchanges. Remember that how it differs from the old system is it provides an expansion of Medicaid, which is direct more dollars being spent to provide health care to people who are at the lower echelon of income levels. But it also provides a exchange system with subsidies, and that's all for people who are not getting employer insurance. The problem is that it's made to look like a marketplace, but it's not. There is no competition. And what it does is it allows patients to enter the system when they get sick, to use the system and spend a lot of dollars, and then when they're done and when they don't want to write any more checks, they can exit the system. And we've known for years that any time in healthcare, and this is true of any insurance, it would be the same thing as buying insurance just before you have a car accident or just after you have a car accident. If we could do that, then of course pretty soon car insurance would be unaffordable. So it's not really a marketplace. It's designed to be a giant bureaucratic system, and so anytime you have a bureaucracy and not a marketplace where there's competition between providers, insurance companies, hospitals, all you get is more and more cost, less and less options, and ultimately the premiums become unaffordable.
Well, Dr. Fleming, a lot of our listeners, average people like myself, want to know the basic question: why is the government involved in healthcare? And you did give us a detailed answer. You went back to the 1960s. But what we're talking about now is here we are. Is the government, the people that say Obamacare light, they say that meaning that it's still the government intervention. But why is the government involved at all?
Well, remember that Obamacare put in place a huge structure. And because of the arcane rules of the Senate, unless we have 60 votes in the Senate, which we don't have, we can't take apart that big structure. But what we can do is remove the plumbing. For instance, you heard me say that we're going to remove the mandates for individuals and businesses where you won't have to provide insurance or buy insurance. The truth is that will remain as part of the law in existence. It's just that when we remove through reconciliation, which only allows us to touch taxing and revenues, spending, by removing those taxes, we've in effect made it unenforceable for laws that will remain on the book. So it'll be sort of like saying you may have a law on the books that you can't spit on the sidewalk, but there's nothing there to enforce that. Ultimately, we do need to enforce that or remove that law entirely, but we can't do it without 60 votes in the Senate. But we can do the next best thing, and we can take out all of the enforcement mechanisms, and that's what reconciliation allows us to do, is to remove the taxes. It allows us to remove the spending, and therefore much of the law becomes unenforceable, inane, and just simply,
and unable to be enforced.
print.
So it removes
Exactly.
that burden off of the American people.
Right.
We have Dr. John Fleming on the phone with us, former Congressman, 4th Congressional District. As we head into the break, we're going to keep Dr. Fleming through the break, and we'll be back on the other side. If you have questions, 318-320-5335. This is Mike Wood sitting in for C.L. Bryant. We have Dr. John Fleming on the phone, and we'll be back after the break.
I done ran into my baby.
Welcome back to the C.L. Bryant Show. This is Mike Woods sitting in the studio with Michelle and Dr. Philip Roseman, and we have Dr. John Fleming, former Congressman, 4th Congressional District, on the phone. John, as we went into the break, we were talking about the upcoming AHCA, and I think Michelle may have a question.
Well, we also just got a phone call. We weren't able to put him on with you, so we got the question from him.
Sure.
A listener named Tommy, and he kind of reiterated what I was asking you, and it may sound like redundant, but people want to know why the government isn't health care. He said to him it sounded like just more mandates. It's more of the same. And you know how you're very conservative yourself. So, people want less government. So explain to us how this bill is going to create less government, that this so-called Republican plan is just the same thing, just under a different name.
Well, first of all, why is government in health care? And the reason is, going back to what I said before, is we've always had this perplexing problem. What do you do for people who can't afford health care, who don't have insurance, who don't have a job, or maybe they're disabled? And, little by little, government has gotten involved in taking that role, and Americans have seemed to like it, because you see how many people who are on Medicare today would love to see their Medicare stopped. You just wouldn't find it. So in many ways, Americans have wanted more government health care. The problem comes in, that was only a segment of health care. Now, government has, with Obamacare, taken over the entire health care system and made it into a big bureaucracy, and that's the heartburn people are having. It's forcing middle-class people to subsidize health care for a growing number of people who may decide that they would rather not work and earn their own keep, plus at the same time,
Exactly.
It's been diminishing the economy, making it more difficult to find jobs. So, the CBO claims that a number of people are going to lose their insurance with this repeal and replace. But the truth is, many are going to choose to end their insurance because they don't find it a good consumer item to have. And the other thing is that once the economy picks up, as we repeal Obamacare, because it is damaging the economy, there'll be more employer-based policies out there, which is really what most people want. But ultimately, in this first pass with this legislation, we can only stop the taxes and the spending. That's all we can do. The net effect of that is to take away a lot of what's in Obamacare. But government is still left, and until we get Democrats to work with us, we cannot remove government as being the overseer of our health care system. We have to have at least a 60-vote threshold in the Senate, and we only have 52 Republican senators.
Well, and we had another caller that also asked about you personally. We all are aware that you're very conservative, and you were the founding member of the Freedom Caucus. So looking at this bill, and I'm not asking you, if you can't answer, you can't answer, but from what you know about this bill, would you vote for it if you were in Congress right now?
Michelle, I would vote for it, because I do think that it meets the threshold. I mean, let's put it this way: we can't fail at this. If we don't pass the repeal and replacement and get going in the proper direction, then Obamacare will stay in place and our system will collapse. We'll be forced to redo the whole thing, but a lot of people will get hurt in the process. So I think we need to work to make it as conservative and as free market as possible. But at the end of the day, we've got to get enough votes in the House and 52 votes in the Senate to pass this thing and put it on the president's desk. And yes, I would vote for it. I would support it.
And John, that's a great recommendation and a great endorsement. As we were talking earlier in the show, we're talking about the press and not only the misrepresentation but the misleading. And you've touched on the CBO numbers. And of course, Speaker Gingrich came out today and just hammered the CBO. So many of that 24 million that they say are going to lose, they're losing it of their own free will. They're getting out of the healthcare system. So it's not.
Well, of course.
When you say I don't want it, that isn't a loss. That's a choice.
But Mike, as you know, as the price comes down, more people will jump in the market and buy it. It's all a value equation for consumers. And remember that the CBO overestimated how many people would be covered under Obamacare.
Yeah, they didn't get Obamacare right, did they?
And
No, they didn't.
Obamacare is just pricing a lot of people out of health care, period. People are going bankrupt paying for health insurance that, is minimal coverage at best. Somebody's paying for this, and I think what's happened is we've shifted it to the middle class to pay for it, and that is what I think is the true problem with Obamacare, and hopefully something the Republican plan is going to fix.
And I will say, we just got another caller. He was angry, Dr. Fleming, and he said he was part of the original Tea Party, and he was naming everyone as rhinos on the phone that we've interviewed, blah, blah, blah. But putting all that aside, and this is the third caller we've had in a row talking about this, and like I said, he was yelling, he's angry, and he wants to know, he said that in 2010 we voted to repeal and replace Obamacare. Get down to the nitty-gritty. You are a conservative. We just have a few minutes left. Assure the listeners, because somehow they're not being assured, that this is not enlarging government or keeping it the status quo.
Yeah, I think that they are being misled through statements in the media by calling it Rhino Care or Obamacare Light. I think that's triggering. That's kind of a hot button for a lot of people, and they're not really seeing through all of the mist and finding what's actually there. The truth is that because we can only repeal it through reconciliation, and you're right, I voted over 50 times for repeal, although none of it ever got any further except one time we got it to President Obama's desk and he vetoed it. But this is the first time we'll actually get it signed into law. But we cannot, because of the arcane rules of the Senate. I mean, these are rules that have been around for 200 years. We can only remove the spending and the taxing portion, which really pretty much neutralizes 80% of it. The bad news is it does leave the overall mechanism in place, but that too can be removed, but we need a 60-vote threshold in the Senate. So instead of getting angry, people need to get out there and vote for more Republicans who, once we get this done, will be willing, when we have elections in less than 2 years, to put 60 Republicans in the Senate so we can repeal everything that the government does under
So instead
Obama.
of get angry, get active.
Absolutely.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see as we go through the budget process tomorrow, and Dr. Abraham described it as we can't repeal it, but we can remove the plumbing, and by removing the plumbing, that's the start. And as you're saying, we don't have the votes in the Senate, but through reconciliation, we can at least get rid of the taxes.
Let me just say this, and I know we're closing up. When it comes to the net effect of what's going to be done between passing this repeal and replace and what Tom Price is going to do with because there are a lot of powers under this law given to Health and Human Services, it's going to look vastly different than Obamacare. Obamacare will be completely emptied out. It'll be a mere shell. It'll be print on paper. So people need to understand that, yes, technically a lot of the law will be in place, but it won't be enforceable. And that's what people really need to understand about this. And as long as we keep moving forward from that point, we can take it all down, because we do worry that a future president and a future Senate that's under Democrat control can put the bones back on the body here. But I think we've got to have success here. We've got to get this through and then take this thing down one piece at a time.
Dr. John Fleming, former congressman, 4th Congressional District. John, appreciate your time in Washington, and appreciate all that you have done and will continue to do. This is Mike Woods sitting in for C.L. Bryant. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to the C.L. Bryant Show. This is Mike Wood sitting in the studio with Michelle and Dr. Philip Roseman, and we just finished talking to Dr. John Fleming, and we've had Dr. Ralph Abraham talking about the repeal and replacement for Obamacare. Dr. Roseman, during the break, we were talking a little bit about the process. Why don't we talk a little bit about the process to help the listening audience understand exactly why we're doing what we're doing?
Yeah, because they're frustrated that nothing's being done right now. They thought because Trump is president that the very next day all this would change. And Dr. Fleming said he voted 50 times to repeal Obamacare, and that it actually made it to the president's desk one of those 50 times, and of course the President Obama vetoed it. Well, and for a caller to call Dr. Fleming a rhino, which Mike Woods hates it. But anyway,
look, I think Dr. Abraham and Dr. Fleming both said the same thing, which is this is a process that we're moving through. The intent is to completely do away with Obamacare. The first things but it's a three-phase process. And the first phase of the process is where we're at now in terms of reconciliation and the things that have to be done, the money part of Obamacare. If you neutralize that, I think John Fleming said that's 80%. Okay, I mean, certainly, you follow the money. Second phase, regulatory change. That's going to be huge. I think that's where Tom Price, who all along has been the Republican leader, okay, over the last 8 years, he's been the Republican leader at trying to do something about Obamacare, and he has a certain foundation principles that he lives by that he thinks are the right principles, and they are. They're market-based principles, and he's a doctor, and he is going to make a lot of changes to what happens in Obamacare in a regulatory environment. The fact is, when they put this thing out, they gave a lot of power to the DHH at the Department of Health and Human Services, thinking that they would always be in control of it.
To our listeners, that's big government. That's what we think, that the size of government, it costs money. Those are jobs. When you empower them to do stuff, they have to hire more people, so the size of government grows. So, but that's how Obama thinks. That's the difference in us. It's not that he's an evil person. It's just that he thinks that the government should be in charge of these things because he doesn't trust it to communities to take care of.
And most of that was done through regulatory issues. It's not done by legislation a lot of times. A lot of it is done in the bureaucracy of Washington, D.C. And then the third phase is doing all the things that people are upset about that are not in the first phase. The things like what we do across state lines and how we make it a true market-based enterprise in healthcare, and that's the third phase. Once those three phases are completely done, then we'll be there. And remember that the CBO is just talking about, the budget office just talking about phase one and what phase one is going to do. It has nothing to do, and it's not even looking at the future with phase two and phase three.
But see, all those things can be misleading to the average person because you roll these acronyms out, the CBO and this and that. But, and Tom Price, they don't even know who Tom Price is. But I guess it's what you're saying. Tom Price is in charge of the regulatory part of this, which is the rules. And he, by a stroke of a pen, can he change the regulations? Or do we have to wait till this bill passes that changes the taxation part of it?
I'll tell you, I've listened to Tom Price for the last 12 years. I mean, he truly has a grasp of this. And he is the man that needs to be in the place that he's at right at this moment. And he is the person that has given the great thought to all of this. And he's been leading the physician part of the caucus. He's been leading the Republicans in trying to think through what we need to do, not just abolishing Obamacare, but how do we have a better system than we had even before Obamacare? Not just get rid of Obamacare, but how do we have a system that truly will work and is better than the one we had even before Obamacare?
But, Michelle, to help the listening audience understand why the bill that's coming out of budget is written the way it's written, if they tried to do it all at one time to push it through the Senate, the Democrats could filibuster. We would need 60 votes to get it through the Senate. We don't have the 60 votes. So as Dr. Abraham has said, they're removing the plumbing part, which will be allowed to go to the Senate and through reconciliation can be voted on by simple majority. And that's the key. Because Vice President Spence is in charge of the Senate.
Pence.
I'm sorry. Pence.
That's okay. You're old.
That's right. I used to ride with a guy named Spence. But anyway, because he is in charge of
in the Old
Senate
West.
rules, he can allow this to be a simple majority vote, which we have in the Senate, and so we can get the plumbing removed, which then will allow Dr. Price and others then to address the other two phases that Dr. Roseman has been talking about. So.
Let's just be realistic, and this is how we can get this done.
It's a great start, and it's the way it works, whether you like it or not. This is Mike Woods. We're sitting in the studio with Michelle and Dr. Philip Roseman, and we will be back after the break. Welcome back to the C.L. Bryant Show. This is Mike Woods sitting in for C.L. Bryant, and we have Michelle in the studio and Dr. Philip Roseman, and we have been cussing and discussing the repeal of Obamacare, and have had some interesting phone calls of folks who have different ideas and different opinions. But
well, we wanted to touch on something that really was on your mind and heart, because it does have to do with Obamacare. You feel like the media has been misleading. You know, the president calls it fake news, but you feel like they mislead every time they talk or write something.
You can put a spin on any story, and let's talk about the story that's going around right now on U.S. attorneys. Every incoming president, regardless of their party, gets to pick all the new U.S. attorneys, as they get to pick their own cabinet. So the media, as a result of Trump, are reporting that Trump has fired all these U.S. attorneys like it's never been done before. Guess what? Clinton got rid of more U.S. attorneys.
They called it replacing. I saw that. They showed us the headline difference. In 1992, they said Clinton replaces. But in ours, they say
fired. you know, guess what? He fired Obama's cabinet too. I mean, he's done a lot of things that every president has done, and that's what, you know, got my dander up when I said, you know, not only do they misrepresent, they mislead, and it's easy to put their spin on the story and make it sound like.
Well, and they also are dividing they try to divide the Republican Party. So they say that Paul Ryan is the devil. And people believe that. But when I talk to people on Capitol Hill that are the most conservative, and let me tell you to the audience, I get to talk to the most conservative people on Capitol Hill that work with Paul Ryan. He's not the devil, but they twist the things that he does. And even right now, he and Trump are one-minded. And Mike Pence, who is the most conservative, intelligent man, and Tom Price. Tom Price and Mike Pence are one-minded with Paul Ryan, but the media creates and fabricates all kinds of stories.
There's a story out today that the president is distancing himself from Congress, that he's decided he wants Obamacare to fail on its own, and yet his own press secretary today said, no, the president still supports the AHCA and is all behind the bill. So,
he's absolutely behind it. He's having private meetings all the time. So the media, and this is why the administration, the Trump administration, the president himself, are aggressive against the media because it's like propaganda.
Well, it's so easy to spin it your own way, and you know, one of the things that John Fleming talked about, you know, the healthcare market is unlike any other market for insurance. And the example he used, you can't have a wreck and then go buy car insurance. It doesn't work that way. But yet in healthcare, and one of the things in doing research, insofar as why, you know, the big conversation piece is pre-existing conditions. Well, what's the deal about pre-existing conditions? Here you go. The sickest 10%, and it's going to be a huge cost because you haven't paid for it all along. You know, it's interesting, these discussions as we go forth. But the bottom line is that the healthcare market is different from any other market, and it was interesting to hear John Fleming's comment that until 1965, I mean, I'm a lot older than you, Michelle, but I remember back in the days.
A lot older.
I remember back in the days where when we went to the doctor, Mother paid for it. You know, we didn't have an insurance card. She paid Dr. Wedgeworth, my pediatrician, the $10 or what.
Now, were there paved roads at the time,
well,
or was it
you know,
dirt
we
roads and horses?
We had to take the Conestoga wagon to get into town, but. You know, so to think, Philip, that, you know, your mother probably paid for you to go to the doctor when you were little. You're a little younger than I am.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I tell you, the other thing that we got to keep in mind is to keep the goal in mind. And as Republicans, sometimes we're fighting each other so hard that we're not really keeping in mind where we want to go. And this healthcare thing is pretty much that same type of situation. We've got to make this work. You know, this Obamacare or Affordable Care Act is totally unaffordable, and it is very detrimental to this country, and something needs to be done. We have to get together and do it.
He is talking about are the penalties, I call them taxes, that Medicare beneficiaries have to pay, called late enrollment penalties. And basically it's just like the Obamacare tax or penalty where if you don't have insurance, then Medicare penalizes the Medicare beneficiaries, and a lot of the folks that are penalized, mainly it's on the prescription drug plan. They did not need, that's what it is on, pardon me. And a lot of those folks did not need prescription drug coverage, and therefore they didn't buy the prescription drug coverage. They basically self-insured because they could get, $4 or $5 prescriptions at Walmart or Sam's or Walgreens or wherever. And so they were just paying for their own prescriptions. But that's something that needs to be addressed, and nobody is talking about it.
Well, let me just let these gentlemen know. Kenneth Bretches is an insurance agent. Is that health insurance that you provide?
I do all types of insurance, but a lot of Medicare plans and Part D prescription drug plans. And, that's one of the things that was set up originally when President Bush was in office. When they set up the Medicare Advantage and Part D prescription drug plan, they built in penalties for people who did not take the prescription drug plan. I mean, I have clients that are paying, anywhere from $3 a month to $25 a month in penalties because they chose not to have a prescription Part D plan. And, to me, it's not right. They, if they're going to do away with the penalties for Obamacare, they need to do away with the penalties for the Medicare beneficiaries as well, because a lot of those folks, they can't afford to buy their medicine sometimes, and it puts an undue burden on folks who are struggling to pay their bills.
Yeah, that's very true, and that's a very good point. I had not have thought about it before, but you're absolutely
Well,
right.
and it's all about sharing the risk. And the sad thing is that that's the way car insurance works. That's the way house insurance works. And different classes of people have different rates. But for some reason, we've gotten away from that in healthcare. I appreciate your call. This is Mike Woods. We're sitting in the studio with Michelle and Dr. Philip Roseman, and we will be back after the break. Sheriff, glad.
I want to thank Representative Horton for first listening to me and working on this with us and leading the charge for me. But this actually stems from a real life incident we had last year in Bossier Parish, actually an alternative school, and the students were, some of them were 17. Anyway, they pulled out guns at school and were making some threats. School was locked down and a big search and a big procedure. Anyway, come to find out, one of the guns actually turned out to be a real one. The the other was a fake gun. But you could not tell the difference between them until you actually tried to make it safe and get the clip out and get the bullets and so forth. Only then could you tell that it was fake and not real, and that is very dangerous.
And you know, in looking and I've seen pictures of guns, both fake and real, and you really can't. I mean, even with a close-up picture, until you get the gun in your hand and break it down, you don't realize that it's not a real automatic weapon.
That is correct, until you really hold it in your hands. I mean, if you have any doubt, I know we're radio, but folks should just, Google imitation firearms, see what pops up.
And we've got a picture. We've got a side-by-side picture that we're going to post to Facebook. But I think the controversy that we want to address right away is, and I think both of you have been doing interviews all day, and it is this question that people look at this bill, and we're going to post it as well, a link to it on our Facebook page, and they think that 5-year-olds with toy yellow guns that they brought to school, or a boy with a little cowboy, in second grade, cowboy guns, is going to be arrested. So what do you guys think about that?
Well, from a law enforcement standpoint, that's why we have trained officers with discretion. Obviously, that's a ridiculous scenario that, we would arrest a kindergartner with a green water pistol in his lunch pail. I mean, that's ridiculous.
But does this bill cover that? Because, Dodie, didn't somebody ask you that in an interview today?
Yes. Well, I had a private call from the Federation of Teachers, and that was a concern. And I told them that we definitely, it's not our intent to arrest 5-year-olds. I have grandchildren that age, because we're not talking about an obvious fake. We're not talking about anything that obvious imitation. We're talking about imitation and fake guns that look real and pose a real threat to the student and to the officer. And we're trying to prevent a tragedy from happening.
And to the other students. So,
yes.
Sheriff Whittington, the guns that we're looking at here in the studio that are supposedly fake look like real guns. So the scenario being at a high school, as you said, a person pulls out this gun. People could be afraid. And then an officer... Go ahead.
That's why they take them, to cause fear and chaos and panic and threaten and intimidate people with them. That's why they carry them, and that's why they get the ones that look real. I mean, that's the whole purpose behind them. And that's why they're so dangerous, because I can promise you, if one of those are pointed at one of our deputies, it's not going to be a good day for that other person.
Right, and so the deputy thinks that it's a real gun, and this person is pointing a gun at him, so the deputy then has to respond, which could injure the guy with the fake gun.
Absolutely. And I hear a lot of people say, oh, well, they have the little red things on the end, the little, required by federal law. Guess what? They take those off, because they want them to look real.
Isn't that interesting? Criminals taking stuff off that's required by federal law. That's shocking.
We've even heard of some instances where they take the little red caps off the toy guns, put them on their real gun. So now law enforcement's in the predicament of determining, gosh, well, got a red cap on it. Must be fake, but guess what? It's not. So, of course, that doesn't affect this bill here. But the little safety cap, the little orange cap on the end, they remove those, so you can't tell.
Sheriff, I have a little personal experience with this whole deal with imitation guns. I had my son-in-law was murdered. He was a pastor, murdered in a church in Arlington, and he was subdued with a fake imitation gun, and tied up and then killed. But these things are powerful, and I've got to tell you, I'm thankful that y'all see the potential of harm that can be done, and that you have the courage to try to do something about it with this legislation. So to Dodie and you, from somebody who has experienced something really evil as a result of this, these things are the things that you're talking about possibly happening. They do happen.
Yes, that's
Thank
hard
you,
to
Doug.
hear about all that, but I do appreciate that. But that's what it's all about. It's just to make the schools safer for the other students that are there, and hopefully, law enforcement will never have to shoot a child that pulls out a fake gun.
And I thank you, Sheriff Whittington, for honoring me this way. And it's something that I have to make clear. I'm, like you, I'm a staunch Republican conservative. After 5 months in Baton Rouge last year, my constituents understand that there's no problem for me to stand on their behalf. since this bill came out, I had tea parties calling me a rhino and calling me names. I'm infringing on their Second Amendment right, which is clearly does not do because I'm always packing. You know, we defend it. It's a sacred right that we have. But I can tell you, Republicans, quit eating your own. I'm one of you. I'm for you, and I stand on the morals and values that Republicans believe in. And I also believe in the sanctity of life. And this bill is to protect life. And also our police officers at the same time. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here and be able to explain that to people.
As we go into the break, Sheriff Whittington, thank you. I hope you improve. I understand you're a little under the weather, so stay tight, and maybe this weather's going to change, and we'll all do a little better. After the break,
thank you.
Yes, sir. We will continue on with Representative Dodie Horton and Dr. Philip Roseman, Michelle, and myself. This is Mike Wood sitting in for the C.L. Bryant Show. We'll be back. Welcome back to the C.L. Bryant. What we need, Michelle, with the daylight saving times are some cheap sunglasses, but that's just
I thought that was
me.
you playing, because you play the bass, don't you?
From time to time I do, but
well, we're
anyway.
back in the studio with Dodie, Dr. Roseman, the gang's all here, and we've got a caller. Bill, are you there?
I am.
Bill has a question for you, Representative Horton.
Thank you, Bill.
Well, it's not a question so much as I just wanted to make a statement on this play guns and toy guns that look like real. When a policeman or any law enforcement officer is faced with a gun, he doesn't have time to look at it and decide whether it's real or fake. He's got to make a split-second decision. and the decision's going to have to be to save his life. So when you pull a fake gun on a policeman or anybody, they're going to shoot to defend themselves. They have to. That's the way they're trained, and that's the way. If you don't believe it, go to one of your law enforcement places and ask them if you can check out the simulator and see what it's like.
And Bill, you know, and just look at what the media reports when a police officer shoots someone with a toy gun. They, you know, they indicate, well, that they should have known, and you know, how dare them shoot this 14-year-old or 15-year-old that was pointing a toy gun at them. Good point.
It's just like years ago when the guy had a cell phone and he pointed like a gun. They don't have time to decipher what that is. It just looks like a threat, and they have to respond to it immediately.
Exactly right.
It's a split-second decision, so you should know that before you try playing with a toy gun.
There you go, Bill. We appreciate your phone call.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, my daddy was a Shreveport police officer, and I remember all those years ago when it was 60s and early 70s that they had a few try that on them, and they definitely had to shoot. And it's, again, this is in a school environment, and these are not your little cap guns that my grandbabies play with. These are guns made to look real, people, and it's a real issue, and we needed to pass a law with some teeth in it to protect our law enforcement, and also to keep our students engaged, and hopefully when this law passes and gets out, they'll obey it and save themselves from harm by making a crazy choice.
Well, and how beneficial, as sad as this is and hard to talk about, that you're sitting next to Dr. Roseman, who personally can attest to how important something like this is.
It is, and Dr. Roseman, I'm still just so taken by your testimony and your willingness to share that. A lot of us have known Dr. Roseman, admire him, and remember when this tragedy happened to him and his family, and that part we never knew. And so I'm so grateful for you to share that. There's a Terrebonne deputy who had to shoot a 14-year-old who pulled a pellet gun that looks like a Colt 45 caliber and shot him. And now he's being prosecuted because he defended himself against something that looked real. So if we can prevent it from happening in our schools, then this bill's worthy.
Well, and I'm sorry that you're getting so attacked. I mean, I've known you for years, and it's always been about how pro Second Amendment you are.
Yes, I am.
And for
well, she has her own concealed carry permit.
Well,
I mean,
and her dad was a policeman. Yeah. This is a girl that
this
is
lady's
a girl
packing
with
heat.
guns. Exactly.
Always.
So you wouldn't want to do anything to do that. And you know, about the law, people say, well, did we need this law? Well, we've proven that we did, but this doesn't affect the rights of anybody. This doesn't hinder. There's not going to be a place that this is going to take it to the next level. We're specifically talking about these guns that we're going to send pictures of. What do you expect to happen to this bill? And what do you need our listeners to do? Because this controversy, like I said, tomorrow those stories are going to come out. What can our listeners do to help support this?
Read it and understand it, and if you have questions, please contact me. I'll sit down with anyone. Like I said, I'm going to work with the Federation of Teachers to make sure that there's clear understanding. I have the NRA looking at it to make sure it can't be misused in any way. I believe the exemptions or exceptions to this law are very clear. Like, you know, if you're in the ROTC and you have a function, I mean, it's definitely exempt, and it can't, if you have your own personal weapon in your vehicle, that's an extension of your car, of your home. I mean, the laws do not change for concealed carry. The laws do not change for your gun rights. This strictly is to prevent a student from being killed.
The abstract, Michelle, for House Bill 43 says prohibits the possession of imitation firearms, projectiles, or ammunition on school property at school-sponsored functions or within 1,000 feet of a school campus. And then, as Dodie said, it lists specific exemptions. I mean, it's a well-written bill. It's easy to understand. And the reason, as Sheriff Whittington and Dr. Roseman have both reiterated, is to protect the students and to protect the deputies and the law enforcement officers that are in these schools from having to make a rash decision. Is it real? Is it fake? So,
and it clearly has nothing to do with kindergartners. I didn't know anything about this bill, but sitting here with you all, looking at these pictures, this is something legitimate. This is in high schools, but this is also criminals doing the same thing. These are fake guns. I may not have experienced this personally, but Dr. Roseman has, and Sheriff Whittington. And in order to protect and save more lives, this is needed. But again, this is a bill that you're proposing.
Correct.
We're not in session yet.
No.
So there's time to discuss this. Like you said, the NRA is going to look at it.
Right.
We're going to post it on our page. You're
thank
posting
you.
it, and so people can look at it and discuss it. But you know what? It's back to that misleading mainstream media, asking the most absurd questions and accusing you of trying to clamp down on guns for individuals.
It amazes me because my own party, the Republicans jump on it quicker than anyone. I mean, come on, guys. I'm. You don't know me. South Louisiana doesn't know me, but District 9 knows me, and I have their back. I am their voice, and they trust me with this bill. It's not frivolous. It's not a feel-good bill. Trust me, nobody likes being ridiculed. But again, I'm thick-skinned. I praise God for it, and they didn't elect me because I'm weak. I'll stand for what I feel is right. If I could prevent anything from happening in our schools, if I could have prevented, this law could have prevented Dr. Roseman's son from being murdered because of a fake gun. I mean, we're going to have to see how far we need to go. But right here, right now.
Well, and Sheriff Whittington talked to you about this.
Yes. Oh,
and
yes.
I think he is quite competent.
Yes, very much so.
Well, Representative Horton, thank you for coming into the studio. Thank you for what you're doing and serving us in Baton Rouge, and keep up the good fight.
Thank you, sir.
It's nobody said it was going to be easy, and and it's not. But we appreciate what you do. This is Mike Wood sitting in for C.L. Bryant. We'll be back after the break.
My neck's always been red.
Welcome back to the CL Bryant Show. This is Mike Wood sitting in for CL with Michelle. It's been an action-packed 2 hours. I'm so tired. I feel like I've been ironing all day long.
That's more work than you've been having to do in a while. But thank you on behalf of CL Bryant for filling in for him. You know, he's in D.C. Tomorrow's a big day with Freedom Works. They're going to have the day of action. Actually, it's a month of action for them, and this is political action. He's going to be doing the show, hopefully, unless the snow interferes
Weather
with it.
cooperates.
Yeah, he's going to do the show with interviews with Senator Mike Lee, Senator Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, and, of course, the topic will have a lot to do with health care. And but have we not had an informative, powerful show?
I've done this show many times, and this has been the most full show I think we've ever done. It's some really good folks and some really good topics, so I look forward to hearing CL tomorrow from Washington. And as usual, I always appreciate the opportunity to sit here in the chair.
Let's wrap it up with the Obamacare theme. I think that what Philip Roseman said, Dr. Philip Roseman, that the mess in healthcare is prior to Obamacare, and that hopefully this Congress and this president are going to make healthcare better from even before Obamacare. And I think the average person doesn't realize, and I'm that person, what the problems were, because in the 70s we didn't know there was a problem. You know, if something doesn't affect you as a citizen, you don't know that there is a problem until it came to a head. And you know, it's difficult, but at least we're talking about it now.
Well, and as Representative Horton pointed out earlier, so often as Republicans we shoot the messenger. We call it Obamacare light when we hadn't read the bill. We are critical of House Bill 43 and we haven't read the bill. So let's, as Republicans, do our homework before we get out and start being critical of fellow Republicans. Well, this has been a great night. Again, I always appreciate the chance to sit in CL's chair and appreciate the men and women that serve in the armed services. I appreciate those that serve both in police and fire. And as a parent and a grandparent, I appreciate my children and my grandchildren. I ask that the good Lord continue to watch over them. And thank you, listening audience, for giving us your 2 hours tonight. This is Mike Wood signing off for CL Bryant. Thank you.
Left behind, we'll stand by your side, and the bond will never be